know I lose you and I'm wobbling and stuff. All right, so I will start. One thing I have to tell you tomorrow, I have to do a lecture over at FAU from 11 to 12:15. It usually goes, I think I'll probably finish before 12:15. I usually have office hours between 12 and 1, so I'll probably get there about 12:15 would be my guess. So if you come by and late, that's where I'm at. That's I think all I have to say. How's everything? Good, good. All right, so we're going to talk about hemoglobin and oxygen transport. And I think we covered this to some degree earlier, but it's worth a review. So we said that most of the oxygen that's carried in the blood is carried in hemoglobin, right? If we look at total blood oxygen content, it's in two places, right? It's found in hemoglobin and it's dissolved in plasma. And the amount that's dissolved in the arterial blood plasma is what we call the PaO2. If it were venous blood plasma, we would call that the PO2. Good? All right. Each hemoglobin, as you probably know, combines 4 oxygen molecules. It has 4 groups or 4 chains associated with it, 2 alpha, 2 beta. Each of them has a heme group that is centered, and each heme group has an ion that coordinates oxygen at its center. And you have, I don't know how many, but a lot, 280 million hemoglobin molecules per red blood cell. So think about this for a minute. Each red blood cell has the capacity to carry over 8 billion oxygen molecules. So when we talk about somebody who hematocrit is reduced or their hemoglobin is reduced, that represents a very large reduction in oxygen carrying capacity, right? When you think about it in terms of that. It's staggering in a lot of ways. We refer to hemoglobin as either being oxyhemoglobin or deoxyhemoglobin. If it's in the oxyhemoglobin form, that means it's found in oxygen, even if only one of the 4 binding sites are occupied. If it's deoxyhemoglobin, it has no oxygen bound to it. Good? All right. Methemoglobin, I think I spoke to you about earlier when I was speaking to you about hemoglobin saturation. And this is in all of us, some small fraction of our hemoglobin. The iron that's at the center becomes oxidized to exist in the +3 or ferric form. It's only the +2 form that actually can form with oxygen. So we all have some amount of methemoglobin. It cannot bind oxygen, and some drugs can increase this. It can result in something called methemoglobinemia. The one that comes to mind that's really notorious for doing this are nitrates. You know, the drugs like nitroglycerin that they give for angina. Not usually a problem in those people, but if somebody has a genetic predisposition to having high amounts of methemoglobin anyway, it can cause a problem. And then carboxyhemoglobin, heme combines with, do you guys know what this is? CO.
Cardiac output.
That is carbon monoxide, right? That is not carbon dioxide. And the reason I'm not pointing that out to insult your intelligence, it's just that whenever carboxyhemoglobin comes up later on, people tend to think that that's CO2 bound. It's not. It's referring to carbon monoxide bound. And that shouldn't be the case, right? You shouldn't have carbon monoxide bound in your hemoglobin to any large extent. What is the problem? Well, what is the problem with carbon monoxide binding in hemoglobin? It prevents oxygen from binding. It displaces it. It competes with oxygen for binding. And what's really bad is carbon monoxide has something like 200 times greater affinity for hemoglobin than does oxygen. So if it's present, it will outcompete oxygen for binding, and then it binds it very tightly, and it's hard to get it to come off. And that creates a problem because if your hemoglobin can't bind oxygen, your total blood oxygen content is greatly reduced, and you got to get it off there to be able to oxygenate the tissues. Does that make sense? All right. One of the treatments for this is a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. They put people under 2 or 3 atmospheres of pressure of oxygen, and it does 2 things. One is it helps to displace the carbon monoxide from oxygen, but that's probably not the bigger part of what it does. The other thing that it does is it greatly increases the PaO2, the amount of oxygen dissolved in the plasma. And you may remember, that doesn't change the total blood oxygen content too much, but what it does improve is delivery to the tissues. And so in the case where somebody has carbon monoxide poisoning, increasing their PaO2 would be very helpful because it would help them offset those imbalances to some degree. All right, this is just illustrating that which we already spoke about, that if we look at total blood oxygen content, it's carried in two forms. One, as shown here, which is bound to hemoglobin, and one which is shown here as the partial pressure of oxygen, which is the oxygen dissolved in plasma. This also illustrates something that I mentioned to you before, that the majority of oxygen in the blood is actually carried bound to hemoglobin, and only a small percentage is actually, of the total, is actually carried dissolved in plasma. This is giving you the amounts. So 20 mils of oxygen per deciliter of blood is carried on hemoglobin, and only 0.3 mils or 300 microliters of oxygen per deciliter of blood is carried dissolved in plasma. So hemoglobin oxygen really represents a large fraction of the total oxygen content. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions so far? This is showing you the structure of hemoglobin in very general terms. Again, 2 beta chains, 2 alpha chains. There's a heme group at the center. And this is trying to show you the structure of the heme group. And then at the center of the heme group should be an iron, and that iron should be in the +2 form, and it's that iron that coordinates the oxygen. Good? This you probably have seen, that little thing that they put on your finger. And what does it measure? Hemoglobin saturation, right? Normal arterial blood, assuming a normal PaO2, should be 97, 98% saturated. And each form of hemoglobin is pigmented, so each form, whether it has 1 oxygen bound or no oxygen bound, or 2 or 3 or 4, has a slightly different color. And when they put that thing over your finger, you know, it passes light across it, and the hemoglobin forms will absorb light differently. And there's an algorithm that will do the calculation to, based on that, give you an output of how much hemoglobin saturation you have. There are some issues with it that are probably beyond the scope of this course, but does anybody use this? Does anybody know a lot about this? Apparently it can't tell the difference between oxygen bound to hemoglobin and somebody who has carbon monoxide bound to hemoglobin, I think. But there are ways to delineate from that. So just keep in mind it does have limitations, but it's very simple, right? You can put it on somebody's finger and get a reading immediately. You can also do blood gas values and do an arterial stick where you take blood out of an artery. Very basic, not so simple. But sometimes that has to be done. All right, so hemoglobin concentration determines oxygen carrying capacity to a large degree. So if somebody has low hemoglobin, you can conclude that their total blood oxygen content would be lower than normal because hemoglobin carries so much oxygen. Does that make sense? If somebody has high hemoglobin, their total blood oxygen content would be higher than normal because hemoglobin carries so much oxygen. And this we spoke about, that normal compensatory increases in hemoglobin occur in response to high altitudes, smoking, vigorous exercise, anything that causes hypoxia. And we spoke about that when we spoke about erythropoietin production and erythropoiesis in general. And erythropoietin, as you remember, hopefully stimulates red blood cell and hemoglobin productions. Androgens, you guys know what androgens are? Name an androgen. Testosterone, exactly. Yes, and we'll speak about them in endocrine. They also stimulate red blood cell and hemoglobin production. And if you remember when we went over hemoglobin and hematocrit levels, we said that red blood cells and number and hemoglobin was higher in males versus females, and this is the main reason for that. It's because testosterone stimulates red blood cell and hemoglobin production to a large degree. Yeah. No, it's somebody's blood work, and what do they do? I can never remember this story. We asked about it every semester. Yes.
It's when they take ECO exogenously, right? So
Right.
ECO is normally made by the kidneys, but if you want to function at a high altitude kind of performance where you have
They take erythropoietin to boost red. And isn't there a story where people will go train at high altitudes?
and that's legal.
That is legal. But they don't call that blood doping.
No.
No.
What they also do is they remove like a liter or two of the mobilizing right before the
So they go train at a high altitude, or they stimulate erythropoiesis. They take erythropoiesis, they remove the blood that has the higher hemoglobin in the hematocrit, and then right prior to their competition, they re-inject it in. That's so in answer to your, now I can answer your question. Blood doping is doesn't necessary. No, you can do it without test, but if the person was on anabolic steroids in addition to all of that, it would increase that effect even higher. But they test for, do they test for erythropoiesis?
So
Is
I'm
there
not
a test
certain.
for it?
I know that they can tell the difference between normally biologically produced EPO and that they can tell if it's foreign EPO, like exogenous. It looks, it's something's different about it.
I guess levels would probably be different too.
Yeah.
All right, oxygen loading and unloading. So if I tell you that hemoglobin is loading oxygen, does it make sense to you that that means that it's combining with oxygen? In other words, that refers to oxygen combining with deoxyhemoglobin. Does it also make sense to you that this occurs at the lung capillaries to a large degree? Because that's where hemoglobin starts picking up all its oxygen. And then unloading would refer to what?
Delivered to the tissue.
Right, hemoglobin giving up its oxygen, and that would occur at the tissue capillaries, and it would be unloading its oxygen to those tissues. Are you good with those terms? All right, good.
Correct.
So the partial pressure levels that hemoglobin finds itself in favor either loading or unloading. Now, hopefully you remember when we spoke about hemoglobin the other day, and I gave you that little story about cooperative binding, and I told you that that explained why it was that hemoglobin would be maximally saturated at high levels of oxygen, but at low levels of oxygen, hemoglobin would not be as saturated because it would no longer have a very high affinity for oxygen. Does that make sense to you? All right, good. So a high partial pressure of oxygen then would favor the loading reaction, and a low partial pressure of oxygen would favor the unloading reaction. And that works perfectly because when the blood is in the alveolar capillaries, we would expect a very high partial pressure of oxygen. Actually, it would be the highest that would exist throughout the circulation, and that would be the PaO2, and normal should be 100 millimeters of mercury. And if hemoglobin finds itself in a PaO2 of 100 millimeters of mercury, it should be 97 to 98% saturated under normal conditions. But then as hemoglobin goes out and gets to the tissue capillaries, in a resting individual, normally the PaO2 there would be about 40 millimeters of mercury. And once hemoglobin found itself there at a PaO2 of 40 millimeters of mercury, what would now happen to its affinity for oxygen? It would decrease, and that would mean that hemoglobin would give up that oxygen. And when it gives up that oxygen, where does that oxygen go?
Tissues.
To the tissues, and it gets delivered. So that's exactly what you want to happen, right? Because you want hemoglobin to load up oxygen in the lungs, but then when it gets to the tissues where they need delivery of that oxygen, you want it to be able to let it go. So it's important that hemoglobin binds oxygen tightly enough to be able to load it effectively, but not so tight that it doesn't let it go when it needs to. The other thing that's advantageous about this is that the lower the partial pressure of oxygen is, what can you say about the hemoglobin saturation? So if hemoglobin found itself at a PaO2 of 20, how would that compare to its saturation at a PaO2 of 40? Would it be more or less saturated? Less, because the lower the PaO2 goes, the lower the affinity hemoglobin has for oxygen, the more it's going to be released. So if somebody starts exercising or running or doing something that makes them really hypoxic, when hemoglobin gets to those tissues that are very metabolically active, the PaO2 there is going to be very low, and it's going to deliver lots of oxygen to those tissues. But if it then circulates around to the body and gets to another area that's not so metabolically active, the PaO2 there would be higher, and it would not unload so much. So it's really cool in the sense that it delivers the oxygen to the places that need it the most, and doesn't deliver so much to those places that don't need it. Isn't that cool? That's amazing. It's like perfect. It's like magic, sort of. No? So that's what this is referring to. If the affinity of oxygen for hemoglobin were too strong, oxygen would not load in the tissues. If it weren't tight enough, it wouldn't load up in the lungs. And so the bond straight ensures that near saturation in the lungs, but also ensures release in the tissues, and it is actually pretty perfect, as we'll see. And we'll see that there's other things that can affect this binding curve to one degree or another, but they all make complete sense. It's all exactly what you would want it to do. So if you just remember that, then it becomes easy, I think. Isn't that cool? It's cool. So the other really cool part is that when you're sitting here at rest, right, I told you that the PO2 should be about 40 millimeters of mercury. Hemoglobin will unload more in that case, but it still is about 75% saturated. So that means when you're sitting here at rest, and that deoxygenated blood gets back to the heart to go to the lungs, it's still carrying 75% of its oxygen. That gives you this big margin of safety. So that means that if your demands increase further, you have some access to be able to deal with it. It also, you know how people can stay alive underwater for 3 to 5 minutes? Because they're living off of that oxygen that's kind of stored on hemoglobin for that period of time. So it gives us, yeah, we're good. Thank you. It's really cool. So I was all upset because they changed our VC people at the beginning of the semester. And years ago, before we had the people we had for the past few weeks at night, if you couldn't find one anywhere, these things are good. They're like all these good. I'm impressed.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
How come some people are able to hold their respiration for a longer period of time, like
Training.
10,
Training and
15,
adaptation.
something.
So I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, right? That you're talking about like free divers that, you know, and my neighbor used to do it. He used to go spearfishing, and when he first started, you know, barely held his breath for 15 seconds, and now he's like up to 3 minutes. Yeah, no. But so a number of different things. And then there's people that claim that they can slow down their metabolism and all that, but let's not even talk about that. One, they get better able to increase their rate and depth of breathing. The musculature is responsible for that. Gets a little bit better. The lungs are able to expand a little bit more. They can take in more volume. That's one. But I think the major adaptations are probably at the tissues themselves with like, you know how when people do endurance running, they become better able, they can do more with less ATP. Their tissues become better able to utilize or more efficiently utilize the energy systems that they have. They develop more mitochondria. They develop more glycolytic systems to do anaerobic respiration. Sometimes the fiber types change to become more endurance type fibers as opposed to more, you know, heavy lifting type fibers involved in the actions that they're going to do. And then there are a variety of people that I said I wasn't going to talk about that claim that they can slow down their metabolism, slow down their breathing, slow down their on. I think all of that goes into it. It's training that. Yes. To breathe. Yeah, and I think that's training too.
I think that's from the one.
Which one, the reflex?
Yeah, to want oxygen after a while.
Right.
The body is not
Okay.
right. Even though you technically go a minute or two.
Yeah, the drive for it starts way before that, but I think that people through years and years and years of doing that get better and better at being able to extend that.
Like if you want to say, does that relate to language? Just sit
There's
out.
some other parts of the story that I can't remember. But
I'm so baffled. I'm just like,
this shows you the partial pressures of oxygen as a, or hemoglobin saturation as a function of the partial pressure of oxygen. So here in the arterial blood or at the lung capillaries, we see that the partial pressure of oxygen should be normally 100 millimeters of mercury. This is at sea level, and we expect hemoglobin to be 97% saturated. This, a PO2 of 40, this would be the partial pressure of oxygen that exists in the tissue capillaries of somebody in a resting situation. So like all of you sitting here, you would see that when hemoglobin got there, it would unload almost 25% of its oxygen to those tissues, but it would still retain, so it would still be 75% saturated. As the partial pressure of oxygen becomes lower and lower and lower, so the tissues become more metabolically active, hemoglobin will give up more oxygen to those tissues. Does that make sense? All right, and this is it in graphical form. Same thing, they're just taking those numbers and put it on this oxy-hemoglobin dissociation curve. So, again, the reason this curve is shaped like this has to do with the cooperative binding of oxygen. That was really funny. Sorry, it was nothing you did, it was the guy who came in on that side. All right. It's because of the cooperative binding that oxygen exhibits. And again, as the partial pressure of oxygen gets higher, hemoglobin has an easier time binding it. And so when the partial pressure of oxygen is 100 millimeters of mercury, as it is at the alveolar capillaries, we see that hemoglobin is almost fully saturated. As the partial pressure of oxygen decreases, what happens to the hemoglobin saturation? It decreases. So here, at a partial pressure of 40, if we follow this up, we see that hemoglobin is 75% saturated. If it's only 75% saturated, that means it's given up almost 25% of its oxygen to those tissues, right? Wherever that blood was. If you start exercising and your muscles become metabolically active, and your partial pressure falls even lower when hemoglobin gets there. So let's say the partial pressure of oxygen at your skeletal muscles, at those vessels, was only 20 millimeters of mercury because they were working so hard. When hemoglobin got there, it would only be 30% saturated, meaning that it would have given up almost 70% of its oxygen to those tissues. So this is a really cool adaptation in the sense the more hypoxic the tissue is, the more oxygen hemoglobin will deliver to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Really? If it doesn't, would you tell me?
The more hypoxic.
The more hypoxic,
The more oxygen.
the more oxygen hemoglobin will deliver to that tissue.
Yeah.
Yeah, good?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I'm asking because every year I teach this and every year I think it makes sense and then it comes up so close to the exam and I start getting all these questions and people have no idea what I'm talking about.
Is
so.
it because it's a deficiency of oxygen?
All right. Oh, something else I want to point out here. Do you see how it's flat in this portion of the curve? All right, so that means that whether your PaO2 is 100 millimeters of mercury or whether your PaO2 is 90 millimeters of mercury, your hemoglobin saturation is pretty much the same. That gives you a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of margin of safety. So let's take the person that has pneumonia, probably maybe not a horribly severe case of it, but they're not exchanging gases too well, and their PaO2, instead of being 100, is only 90. Are they going to really experience much difference in total oxygen content in their blood? No, not at all. And delivery should be okay, and they wouldn't really be affected. It wouldn't be until you started getting to, partial pressures of oxygen a bit below that, 80 or in the high 90 or low 90s, that you would actually even see any real issues. Do you guys see that? And the fact that it's steep in this region, which is in the region of the partial pressures of oxygen that would exist at the tissues, that's useful because that means for any small reduction in partial pressure, you have a big decrease in hemoglobin saturation. So again, it makes it more sensitive to being able to deliver more oxygen to those tissues that are slightly more hypoxic than other areas. Does that make sense? That's all in here somewhere. This I said in the systemic arteries, the partial pressure of oxygen is 100 millimeters of mercury, hemoglobin is 97% saturated. In a resting individual, after gas exchange has occurred, the partial pressure of oxygen in the systemic veins and also at those tissue capillaries would be 40 millimeters of mercury. So hemoglobin in that deoxygenated blood that would be returning back to the heart would still be 75% saturated. So that again does give you some margin of safety. You don't need to know these numbers, it's just telling you how much is unloaded. And so under resting situations, about 22% gets unloaded. But this is good because if our demands increase further, you want to exercise, you want to run, you got to run away from somebody, you have to push your car up a hill, whatever, you're going to have the capacity to do that because you have this excess reserve of oxygen. So if you increase the demands further, the partial pressure of oxygen will go down and hemoglobin saturation will go down because it will deliver more oxygen to the tissues. Good? All right. I think the channel is 42 for the 6 of you that are participating. Which of the following partial pressures would hemoglobin be the least saturated with oxygen? I'll let you answer that for a moment. All right, so what's the right answer? 4. Good. Really? I'm so happy. I have no idea. I'm thrilled. Right, exactly, because that's the lowest partial pressure. Hemoglobin would unload more oxygen to this area. All right, in which of the following locations would oxygen be unloaded most readily? Meaning, where would it load on the most oxygen? In the lungs, systemic arteries, capillaries feeding resting skeletal muscle, capillaries feeding very active skeletal muscle.
4. Duh.
If you put 2, I'm going to come find you.
That's so true.
All right. Why did I say if you put 2, I'm going to come find you? Because gas exchange doesn't occur at the systemic arteries. I guess you could make the argument that some of the vessels have gas. All right, what would the answer be? 4, because that would be the most metabolically active. It would be the most hypoxic. Nobody put 2. That's cool. The lungs, I don't.
Lungs.
Probably wouldn't be much of it. All right, this we said, at rest, there is a large amount of oxygen that is still left bound in hemoglobin. Again, it's still 75% saturated. This is termed the oxygen reserve, and it can keep the brain alive for a few minutes if breathing ceases. Also important to have this reserve if your demands increase. This I spoke to you about, the sigmoid shape, the flatness at high partial pressures of oxygen gives a margin of safety, whereas if you have a small reduction in the PaO2, it's not going to have big impacts on total blood oxygen content. In the steep portion of the curve, small changes in the partial pressure of oxygen will result in large differences in hemoglobin unloading. But that's good because those are the partial pressures of oxygen that exist in areas where gas exchange will be occurring. And blood is unloaded most where it's needed most. All right, now, the next section speaks about a few factors that can change the binding or change the shape of this curve slightly. It really is changing the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen to a small degree. Now, the way to think about this is to just figure out what would be most advantageous. So the factors we're going to speak about, at least 3 of the factors. One is elevation in CO2, one is a reduction in pH, and one is an elevation in body temperature. What do all those things have in common, or what situation would all those things occur in? CO2 going up, pH going down, and body temperature going up. Exercise, right? Or some sort of activity. Would you want hemoglobin to unload more oxygen under those conditions, or would you want it to hold more oxygen under those conditions? Unload. You want it to deliver more to those areas that are metabolically active, right? Do you all agree?
Yeah.
That is exactly what happens. So if you remember that, you should be fine. I'm going to talk to you about how the curve shifts and all that, but at the end of the day, I think that's probably the most important thing. All right, so your book goes into terms, so we're going to speak about the effect that reducing pH has. This is called the Bohr effect. I'll never call it that. I'll never ask you that. I don't care if you know that. But I do need you to know the effect that pH has on the binding curve. Elevated temperature will also cause oxygen to be unloaded more readily. And something called 2,3-DPG, as we'll speak about, and elevated CO2, as we talked about. I think it's just easiest if I show you the curves. This is showing you the effect of pH. The normal hemoglobin curve is shown here at a pH of 7.4. Now I need everybody to pay attention to what I'm about to say, because for whatever reason, this always causes confusion too. Do you see how the one that says 7.2 is to the right of 7.4? That is called a right shift. Do you see how the one that says 7.6 is to the left of the 7.4 curve? That curve is said to be left shifted. So that's where those terms come from. I realized last semester that right before the exam, nobody knew what left and right shift referred to. That's what it refers to. Are you good?
Yeah.
All right, so 7.2 is to the right, 7.6 is to the left. All right, here's what happens. So you told me that if somebody are more acidic, that means their tissues are more active. So you would want hemoglobin to unload more oxygen in that situation. Do you agree?
Yes.
All right, so we're going to look at a PO2 of 40, right? Because this would be just an average PO2 with average capillaries. And we're going to see how saturated hemoglobin is if the pH is 7.2 or if the pH is 7.4. And the way to do that is to follow the curve up until it intercepts and then come over here and look at how saturated we are. Everybody good? All right, so at a pH of 7.2, we pick this partial pressure of 40, we follow it up, hemoglobin saturation is how much?
60.
60%. If the pH is 7.4, now how much is hemoglobin saturated?
75.
75%. So when the pH is more acidic, hemoglobin, the curve, the binding curve shifts to the right, which favors unloading. Does that make sense? All right, what do you think happens if it's more basic and it's left shifted? It's going to right, so let's follow it up. At a PO2 of 40, now hemoglobin is 80-something% saturated, right? So normal was 70%. At a pH of 70.2, it's 60% saturated, and at a pH of 7.6, it's 80-something% saturated. So as the tissues become more acidic, that causes hemoglobin to release even more oxygen than it would for any given partial pressure of oxygen. You get it. So anything that right shifts the curve will facilitate unloading. Anything that left shifts the curve will make it hold on to it tighter. So what should an elevation in CO2 do? Right shifted or left shifted?
Right.
Right shifted. And lowering CO2 would left shifted. Elevating temperature?
Right.
Right shifted. And lowering temperature?
Left.
Left shifted. Exactly. So let's look at those curves. Here they all are.
Oh gosh.
They're exactly the same. So this is showing you the effect of CO2. As CO2 goes up, do you see how the curve gets shifted right? As CO2 goes down, the curve is now this one in purple, it gets shifted left. So if we do the same thing and we look at a PO2 of 40, if the CO2 is higher, hemoglobin is 50% saturated. If the CO2 is normal, it's 75% or 70-something% saturated. And if CO2 is reduced, it's 80-something% saturated. So same relationship. This is showing you the effect of temperature. High temperature would be right shifted. Low temperature would be left shifted. So again, anything that causes the curve to shift right favors what? Unloading. And anything that causes the curve to shift to the left holds it more tightly. Does that make sense? Do you have questions? And this 2,3-DPG, it's produced in response to hypoxia. So the more 2,3-DPG you have, the more hypoxic you are, the more your tissues need oxygen. So an elevation in 2,3-DPG, should it cause a right shift or a left shift? Right shift, so that you unload more oxygen. All right, questions? Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yes,
So you
good.
said- You said the left is considered holding.
It holds the oxygen more tightly.
So is that's considered loading, or just know that it holds oxygen more tightly?
You know, I'm trying to think how I refer to, it's the same thing. So loading means it's holding it, but I would probably on an exam term it, which is going to cause it to release oxygen more readily, or which is going to cause it to hold it more tightly, just so that there isn't a confusion between what loading and unloading means. Other questions? All right, so if you elevate body temperature, that's going to cause hemoglobin to release more oxygen at any given partial pressure. If you elevate CO2, it will cause hemoglobin to release more oxygen at a given partial pressure. If you make a tissue more acidic, it's going to cause it to release more oxygen at any given partial pressure. You all agree?
Yeah.
All right, and if you can't remember, just think of what needs to happen or what should happen. Is correct. All right, this is out of your book. It's just showing, I don't even like the picture. It's just trying to show you that when 2,3-DPG increases, it lowers the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. In other words, it favors delivery of oxygen or favors it releasing it. And this gets produced whenever hypoxia occurs. They give you the example of high altitudes, which is one case of hypoxia, but anything that causes hypoxia will cause it. All right, anemia will also result in DPG production, and that will enhance unloading of oxygen. And it ensures that if hemoglobin decreases, oxygen delivery reductions are minimized. Because even though you've got less hemoglobin, the hemoglobin that you do have will more readily release its oxygen to the tissues. So 50% reduction in hemoglobin only results in a 28% reduction in delivery due to this mechanism. Fetal hemoglobin is left shifted. What does that mean with respect to hemoglobin? They hold it. Right. Yeah. I usually offend people when I say what I'm about to say, but I have a child. I love children, and I love my daughter. I didn't really think of her this way, but from a physiological perspective, babies are a little like parasites, right? I mean, no offense by this. They take your nutrients and they take your blood and they, drain your energy. And for the first 3 months, you're pregnant, you can't keep your eyes open, then they're born. That's the whole other story. Then they become teenagers. Oh my God. I'm just talking about when they're in utero. I'll tell you this, I have a friend of mine who, she has a son that's, I don't know, I gotta say, I always figure she's like, you gotta hear me say this or something. Sure, my phone's off.
I do that too. Right when we saw.
They're waving.
Yeah,
Hi.
we're gonna have to keep it like for 20 seconds because we're having network issues over here.
Okay.
And then we're gonna try to right back, okay?
Okay, you'll let me know when you're back on?
Yes.
Okay.
So we gotta wait on them.
Thank you.
Son has a son that's like 20, he's got to be almost 30 now. He will be living at home until he's 50. And he went off to college for like a small period of time. And when he went off, this friend of mine called, she was crying, she didn't know how she was going to live any longer, she didn't, how she was, her life had stopped, etc. And she said to me, didn't you feel this way when your daughter left? And I said, no.